There you go. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with this. I'm going to start the show. Here you can listen. I'm going to start with the beginning, just 10 seconds of this.
Okay.
There we go.
You have information for us?
No, you already have the information. All the names and dates are inside your head. What you want, what you really need, is a story.
A story can be true or false.
I leave such judgments to you, Inspector.
It's time for Declare Your Independence with Ernest Hancock.
Believe me when I say we have a difficult time ahead of us.
Okay, so I wanted to do that, and then what we need in this is a story. You have all the facts and everything. There's a story. And I had Richard Gage on yesterday. I kept calling him Richard Grove. But anyway, I had Gage on yesterday, and and Grove did a 9/11 thing today, kind of a live podcast deal. And he's going to be going, well, we'll talk about what he had to say a little bit. He's going to Washington, and they're doing a lot of passing out stuff to Congress critters and stuff today. And he'll come on a couple of weeks and he can tell us all about it, because I want to see what's behind their eyes kind of thing, you know. And watched all your videos, bunch of stuff out, and whatever New York Times or Washington this or the London whatever say, it's just my personal story of blah blah and tragedy and hope and kissing my kids and wondering the future of blah blah blah, and nobody does anything about anything. So this is kind of the tact I want. I'm going to give it to you, and then just, you know, all the facts and everything you did in your videos. There's really a story, and I'm glad that you did. So this is, of course, what you were working on. It's 9/11, duh, Ernie. Anyway, the main thing is that you have there were whistleblowers. Well, somebody would have said something, because we've all heard that, and then you go through beginning to end. I'm just going to let you go, and you can do till the top of the hour.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm just going to leave it.
No more. And my daughter may join us because she's homesick today.
That's fine. That's fine. Whatever. Yeah, no more. I get it. It's 9/11, man. I'm all over it. Okay. The volume is really high on you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring you down after I do this. If I forget, you know.
Right. Okay.
All right. So you got to be.
I'll remind you.
Yeah, you got to be quiet.
You have information for us?
No.
Yeah, you got to be quiet while I'm running this, because it's at a much different volume.
You have information for us?
No, you already have the information. All the names and dates.
I'll do it when I'm ready. All right, here we go.
You have information for us?
No, you already have the information. All the names and dates are inside your head. What you want, what you really need, is a story.
A story can be true or false.
I leave such judgments to you, Inspector.
It's time for Declare Your Independence with Ernest Hancock.
Believe me when I say we have a difficult time ahead of us. But if we are to be prepared for it, we must first shed our fear of it. I stand here without fear because I remember that I am here not because of the path that lies before me, but because of the path that lies behind me. I remember that for 100 years we have fought these machines. And after a century of war, I remember that which matters most. We are still here! Tonight, let us make them remember we are not afraid!
Unafeared, you're on Declare Your Independence with me, Ernest Hancock. We have on Wednesday night, James Corbett, thecorbettreport.com. And it's 9/11/2019, which means it's, oh my goodness, 18 years. Damn. And what we've been doing last week, we're going, oh, what are you going to be doing for us, James? Or what are you going to be doing? Is it a sequel to this or that? It's 9/11, dummy. So, of course, he's going to have a bunch of really good videos. And to the main question is kind of, I had that V for Vendetta segment because this reminded me of that one scene. You have all the facts. You know what they did. You just need a story. well, what's really going on? What happened? Who's doing what? A story. Well, James Corbett's going to help us with that. I encourage you to go to thecorbettreport.com, and he has a special category on 9/11. James from Japan, a online researcher and video content producer and everything, all things good, Mr. James Corbett. James, go ahead and let people know that you have, as we do, you go to RemusPhoenix.com right now, we have a whole category of all of the articles and stuff that we've done on 9/11. And here it goes. In remembrance of September 11th, here's a link to all the stories relating to 9/11 for 12 years, I think we've been really covering it. So James Corbett's doing a long time. Where is it they go for you to find all your goodies on this?
I guess the easiest thing, if people are looking in my brand new documentary series, there's a big article thumbnail up there under latest article. It says 9/11 whistleblowers. You click on that and you can get the whole series that I've just done. If you want all of my 9/11 work, there's a tag cloud in the sidebar of CorbettReport.com, and one of the most common tags of the site, of course, is 9/11. So you click on that tag and you will get all my 9/11 stuff, and you can scroll through page after page after page, going back 12 years now of information on 9/11.
Thank you. Now, this series of videos that you did on the interviews of the whistleblowers, we're going to focus on whistleblowers, because tell the audience what it is. We always get asked in this one thing, and you were addressing that in this series. And why this year did you do that series? When did you produce these? Tell me every little thing.
This is something that I've been working on for several years, actually, because it is one of those things that you hear over and over. Someone would have talked. You couldn't do something like this without people talking. Well, my whole point is, yes, people have talked, and they've been ignored. They've been shunned. They have died under mysterious circumstances. They've been marginalized in every way possible to make sure that they do not get heard. And that's why you never hear about the people who talked about 9/11. A lot of people did talk. So that was the impetus for this. And as I say, I think I had a video maybe 6 years ago. I think I had an article before that, 7 years ago, something like that, called Meet the 9/11 Whistleblowers, which was just kind of in sketch form, just going through a few of these stories. But I decided, no, I wanted to do a proper treatment of this and really flesh it out, because I think it's important from a number of angles. One angle is that angle. It is the answer to, but someone would have talked. They did talk. How come you haven't heard of these people? You should be, once you encounter that, after saying someone would have talked, and then you encounter this information, you should go, well, how come I've never heard this? So that's one important part of this. Another part is, it is the human dimension to this inhuman event, this thing that's so much larger than any particular person. How do you get a handle into what that actually means for real people and the real choices they have to make in their life in regards to the tiny little piece of the puzzle they may have, but they do have a little piece of the puzzle. And do you just shut up and go along with it, or do you go and tell your truth, even though it means you're going to get fired, you're going to get shunned, you're going to get smeared, you might end up dead? And there's a lot of people who would make the choice to just shut up, but these are the people.
A lot of people did.
Yep. Well,
these are the people. Go ahead and go through them and talk about them. And the most recent today was the 9/11 Commission co-chairs. I mean, we'll build up to that, but I knew that they had kind of recanted a little bit. I didn't know to that extent. And go ahead and walk us through each one of the whistleblowers and tell their short story. And if you can get done before it's an hour, then you're done.
All right. Well, okay. So let's start with Kevin Ryan, who I think is one of the premier 9/11 researchers. He's done some great research over the years, real scholarly stuff, editing the Journal of 9/11 Studies and things like this. I mean, he knows this stuff when it comes to 9/11. And what some people who might know him from that may not know is that he is himself a 9/11 whistleblower, because in 2001 he was working as the site manager at something called Environmental Health Laboratories. And this was a subsidiary, at the time, it was a subsidiary of Underwriters Laboratories, which is a giant standards multinational conglomerate that does things like produces fire safety ratings and things that then are adopted by governments as part of their standards. And they do the testing for steel and things like this to make sure that it lives up to the standards that are acceptable for building practices and blah, blah, blah. So what's the in here? The in is that in the wake of 9/11, the CEO, the person who was the CEO of Underwriters Laboratories, Loring Knobloch, came to Kevin Ryan's office at Environmental Health Laboratories and was giving a speech, and he said, well, we actually underwrote the steel in the World Trade Center. And he sort of mentioned that in passing, and Kevin just kind of took it, oh, okay, well, that sounds about right, because, Underwriters Laboratories is this huge conglomerate, they probably, okay, they underwrote the steel, all right. So what does that mean? What does that really mean? And as the whole official story started to play out and we started to get this nonsense, it was pancaking, because the steel softened and then it kind of snapped, and then every floor fell on top of every floor. And that's clearly what you saw, right? That's what happened. And this didn't make any sense to Kevin Ryan, for example. Who knows? Well, wait, there's a fire rating. So if they underwrote the steel, that means it passed the fire ratings test. This is steel that was rated for, I think, 3 hours unexposed, without the fireproofing and all of that, which it did have, but they'll say, oh, the planes knocked some of it off and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, it was rated for 3 hours, completely exposed to the fires. And this doesn't make any sense. So then he finds out, he's writing internally in Underwriters Laboratories, he's writing to some of his superiors and going, this doesn't make any sense, what's going on here? And they say, don't worry, we're working with NIST on the official investigation into the collapse. So we're doing our tests.
Well, that's your first
So
problem.
Underwriters Laboratories was involved in some of the testing that NIST did, literally creating mock-up assemblies of the steel frame in the World Trade Center and subjecting it to fires and everything. The weird thing is, the steel passed those tests with flying colors, didn't sag, didn't move a quarter of an inch, didn't do anything. It didn't do anything like what they said. And it was subjected to hotter fires than they said was actually burning in the World Trade Center. So again, what's going on? How did the one of the buildings collapse in under 1 hour? It was whatever it was. Under 1 hour, the entire building completely pulverized to dust, crushing down to the ground through the path of most resistance. Something doesn't quite add up here. Kevin Ryan knew that something did not add up. So he decided, okay, this clearly isn't going anywhere internally. I'm going straight to the top. And he wrote directly to Frank Gale, who was heading the NIST investigation into the Twin Towers collapse, and said, there's something here. I don't know what's going on. This should be a huge issue. If it is, as you say, this was a fire-induced collapse, this should be a huge issue and of great concern to everyone, because that's a huge, we should rewrite all the books, essentially. At the same time as he wrote that email to Frank Gale, he allowed David Ray Griffin and Catherine Austin Fitts to post it on 911truth.org, and it got out there into the masses. And suddenly Underwriters Laboratories phones was ringing off the hooks with people who saw this and were concerned about this. So Kevin gets called into the office the next week and summarily fired, of course, because you've damaged our relations with NIST and our company image. So from that point on, I mean, that was one of the things that motivated Kevin to get into the mix and become a 9/11 activist. And then he joined the board of architects and engineers. He edits the scholarly the Journal of 9/11 Studies, all of this stuff. So the genesis of that was that Kevin had his own personal experience with this.
Okay, that was Kevin. Now, he was, to sum it up, I remember in the video, he was one of the guys working with NIST investigating this after, wasn't he? So, they went there, yeah, what we did before, it's okay, yeah, sign here. And he goes, no, this is not what happened.
Not quite, no. Kevin wasn't personally involved with the Underwriters Laboratory testing with NIST, but he had that original angle where Loring Knobloch had directly spoken to his office where he mentioned this, so that he was involved in that, and
what was the reasoning for him? Then what was the motivation for him coming forward? Because were they saying that Underwriters had already done it? They've already tested it. They said it was good, and now they're saying it's bad. Or I don't understand how they came in later.
So one of the things that happens here is that Underwriters Laboratory, I mean, the official kind of dismissal is, oh no, they didn't underwrite the steel. They underwrote the steel assembly or whatever, whatever hand waving they do to try to say, it's different. But I think Kevin's analogy that he used, I think in one of his letters or emails, was that's like saying that they rated the the doors on the car, but not the car itself, or something like that. Anyway, it's the same thing. They raided the steel assembly.
Okay, so there wasn't a. See, this is where I'm trying to get the chronology. I want to get the story right here. He was saying that, no, it would have withstood this. I understood all that. He's saying they're full of crap. The story doesn't pan out. We tested it. When they tested it, he's talking about the original test and data he was going over, or did they retest something, or did NIST ask them to validate that it did fail, or he just came in for the good name of Underwriter Laboratory? What was his motivation?
So then it was after that point when NIST started its investigation. So it would have been in that 2002-2003 time frame that NIST was setting up a series of experiments and things to underwrite its report and say, oh, okay, so this is how it happened. And one of those tests was specifically Underwriters Laboratory was involved in performing that test. So Kevin knew about that.
Post 9/11.
Post 9/11.
Okay,
yes.
all right.
So this is a NIST's investigation into the Twin Towers collapse. They're doing a series of experiments, right? And one of those experiments was conducted in an Underwriters Lab facility.
Now,
and
did
Kevin
it
knew
show
about
that if there was a failure and he had called BS on it?
No,
or?
That's the thing. So the test showed passed with flying colors. Didn't show any sagging or anything of the beams. It was nothing like what they said. This was a pancake collapse, which was the theory at that time. And Kevin saw that and said, well, this test disproves what you guys are saying. So why aren't you blowing the horn about this? And he was
okay. So they didn't alter it. They didn't falsify it. They just ignored it.
Essentially, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, they even published the results of it in one of their preliminary reports. It's just they didn't, use that data in that way for their final report.
So I was wondering, he was defending the good name of, or NIST actually went to them.
Perspective.
Had him
so when
tested.
he's writing the Tom Chapin, the head of the fire department in Underwriters. He's writing the CEO, Lauren Knobloch, and he's saying this reflects badly on UL because basically what they're saying is you underwrote the steel, but it failed horribly in 56 minutes or whatever. You should be saying no, it didn't. No, it's not like that. Look, it's fine.
This is the part that I'm confused on. They did say they did the test and they said no, it passed, and they go, nothing to see here, and move along. So
that was just one experiment. I mean, they did.
No, I understand. I'm just wondering. I'm just wondering with him involved in this. He's going no. I'm sure in his mind he thought that, look, we proved that that's not what happened, and they just we don't have to use that for proof of nothing because we got another narrative. Yeah, we have another story. Okay, so that was his
it in one of their preliminary reports.
Okay, so that was his chronology. How did you think to include him? And the ones that you did include, these are powerful stories of whistleblowers that did come out. I'm sure that was the theme, but I'm wondering, there's a lot more. And how'd you even know about him? Where'd he come from? Was he out in media? Did you talk to him?
Research for years and years, and that's one of the things. I remember this reading about this story. I wasn't in 9/11 Truth in 2004 when this was happening, so I didn't quite catch it live. But a few years later, when I'm coming to this and I'm looking at the researchers and I'm looking at the research of Kevin Ryan, who's this guy? What's his story? And I read about his story, and I'm like, wow, that's an incredible story. And he literally, he knew he was probably going to lose his job, but he kept going with it, and that was the type of story I wanted to highlight with this. And also, I think it's a story that probably a lot of people, even people who know a little bit about 9/11 Truth, probably don't know the details of that story. And I think it's important to bring that kind of story to light. Again, as I say, for a number of reasons, not only what it tells us about 9/11, but what it tells us, hopefully providing an example for others in the past that they know something, or in the future. There will be more events that there will come a fork in the road where I can just shut up and go along with it, or I can stand up and do something. This is someone who stood up and do something, and I want to highlight that sort of story.
Yeah, no, thank you. And the next one, Kate Jenkins, hers was a fascinating story of a woman that's been through this before. She's like, no, I got sleep well and stuff. So tell Kate Jenkins the story, and how did you come across her? Have you interviewed her?
So I hope this is the first time people are hearing this story, because it was the first time for me when I started researching this series and I was getting into it, and I was asking around, and I asked Kevin Ryan. I said, I'm looking for more whistleblower stories. Who do you think I should be talking to? And he says Kate Jenkins, and I thought, I don't think I know that name. And so I looked it up, and oh, wow, what a story. I had never come across this story. So it was great that he suggested that and that I got into this, because it is such a crazy story. So for people who don't know, Kate Jenkins started out as an environmental scientist at the EPA in 1979. She's a chemist, PhD, and essentially doing hazardous material type of research, looking for safe levels or dangerous levels of blah 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 in blah blah blah. And so she she specialized in dioxin, aka Agent Orange. So in I think it was in the mid 1980s, there was a big brouhaha about Monsanto, of course, the main manufacturer of Agent Orange, at least during the Vietnam era. And there was some complaints from some staff at one of their facilities that they were saying the cancer that they had all gotten was related to their work with dioxin, Monsanto's dioxin. Monsanto came out and sponsored some studies that said, no, yeah, we can't find a link. There's no link. And so that was the mid 1980s. And as a result, there was some veterans groups and other groups that were suing Monsanto that basically got a kind of token payoff, but they didn't really win any sort of big court settlement against Monsanto, because the Monsanto sponsored studies that the EPA relied on said there's no link that we can find. I think it was several years later, as a part of her work, Kate Jenkins started to write. She wrote a couple of memos internally, I believe, in the EPA that were basically saying these studies, these Monsanto-sponsored studies, not finding a link between cancer and dioxin, are basically they're not wrong, but they're cherry-picked. And if they had done these experiments properly and it reported the results properly, the link between the cancer and the dioxin would have been apparent. Essentially, it was a cover-up. A scientific cover-up. And so she wrote emails internally. It got picked up on in the mainstream press. People were hearing about this story. And so EPA opened an investigation. Okay, we're going to look into this. We're going to get to the bottom of it. A couple of years later, they quietly closed the case. No charges, no problems. They had basically cleared Monsanto on essentially technicalities, statute of limitations, and we can't pursue this kind of thing. But they didn't even look at the actual scientific data that Jenkins was providing.
So this gives her a record of doing this kind of thing. But what was her
and from that point, the crazy part of that story is not only did they open this phony investigation and then close it and cover it up, but they actually, the person above Jenkins in the chain of command there, personally wrote a memo or a letter to Monsanto apologizing for sorry that this person brought this up. It won't happen again.
We're so sorry. Well, they fired her, didn't they?
Yeah, they tried to shunt her off into administrative job, basically taking her out of anything that would have to do with regulating, actual dioxins and other toxic chemicals. And so she fought this long, protracted legal battle back and forth for years, which finally, in the end, she was vindicated. And they said, yes, this was politically motivated retaliation for your whistleblowing, and it was wrong for them to even talk about this. And so they forced EPA to put her back in her position. So that was before 9/11.
No, that was a long time ago. That was that
was the 90s.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I thought it was even in the 80s or something that was going on.
Well, the problem started in the 80s.
Yeah,
she, I think, in the early 90s, and then by the mid 90s, that was all.
Yeah, it's hard to realize for me. I remember this. It's 18 years since 9/11 because we've been so immersed in the results of it, and it's just been a continuous. And when you had the elections of 08, 04, and 08, in a post 9/11 world, post 9/11 world, post 9/11, I just got so sick of hearing it. I'm sure. Anyway, we'll get to that later. So now Kate Jenkins is dealing with the reports from the EPA about the air quality for the first responders and the people in Lower Manhattan there that are affected by this. And, of course, they got the EPA out there going, everything's fine, breathe deeply, the gathering gloom. And she was like, no. So what happened there?
All right. So in late 2001, she started writing a series of memos and internal complaints, basically alleging that the EPA was improperly testing, falsifying results to basically give the rubber stamp, the green light to air quality in Lower Manhattan is okay. There's no big problem. And she was blowing the whistle as hard as she could at that time, saying this is wrong. All these results are fraudulent. For example, she pointed to Libby, Montana, which was a site of a vermiculite mining operation that had been contaminated with asbestos, which was one of the materials in the Twin Towers that was part of the problem of the air quality in the dust. And she noted that in Libby, Montana, the actual traces of dust that they found in people's residential places when they went to go and examine the site was 22 times less concentration than what they were finding in the dust in Manhattan. But Libby, Montana was declared a Superfund site, so they bring in the EPA and they bring in special money, and people in the whole hazmat gear are going in and personally, cleaning everyone's house and everything, spending however many millions and millions and millions of dollars to clean this place up. But Manhattan, it's fine, nothing. No federal funds, no emergency, no Superfund. They are safe to breathe. You can go back to work. That was the official word. And so she was saying this doesn't add up. And she was writing memo after memo, which she again continued for years to do this. In 2000, I think it was 2007, she penned a 134-page letter.
Yeah, that surprised me.
Hillary Clinton. I do link it up along with everything else I talk about in this series. I do link it up, corbettreport.com/911 whistleblowers. Go look it up and go read through that letter. At least look through it. 134 pages, and it's got hundreds of footnotes, and it's going through step by step. This test was they were using old methods that have been discredited. This test, they ignored these results. This test was being run by this group, which had this, and she just goes and destroys, obliterates this story that they had concocted in the days after 9/11 that the air was safe and there was no big problem, no asbestos problem. So she was blowing this as hard as she could, and it did get a little bit of play, even in the mainstream media. Around the 5th anniversary is when they started picking up on this story. Weirdly enough, all these first responders and people in Lower Manhattan suddenly dropping like flies from all these illnesses. I wonder if it can be related. And she was saying, yes, of course it's related. And so she did get a CBS interview and other things. Although, interestingly, when I was looking it up and going through all this back and forth and everything, CBS, for example, featured her around the 5th anniversary as part of their series on the dust and the illnesses. And then they had to publish a response because I can't remember who, the New Yorker or something, published a critique of how dare you feature this Jenkins woman? She was crazy, and she was writing all these fraudulent things about dioxins back in the 1990s. And so they had to reply to that and say, well, actually, she was vindicated by the Department of Labor in that dispute, and blah, blah, blah. But you see how it works. They just throw some smears out and say, look. And then, so that's just one part of this story. Anyway, you have to watch the video to see how it unfolds. But essentially,
I was surprised by this one. I did not know about this one. I'm kind of surprised you didn't either. I mean, why have none of us heard about her?
Yeah, well, it was being covered in some places. 911truth.org and other places had talked about this. The Journal of 9/11 Studies had published her letter and things like that.
It's the storytelling. It's the crafting. What you need is a James Corbett story, because when you go back and you make the connections.
And it's such a crazy story because yet again, they go after her. Mm-hmm. They try to fire her. She has to retaliate. They eventually lose and have to put her back in her position. They try to fire her again. She goes through. I mean, it didn't actually fully resolve until last year. That's crazy. So it took
last year. What was the final? What's the latest on her?
There were appeals and then appeals of the appeals and blah, blah, blah. In the end, the Department of Labor vindicated and upheld the 2015 ruling that said, again, this is politically motivated retaliation for your whistleblowing. It was improper for them to attempt to remove you. All of their and there's this whole legal thing to it because it was based on this story.
Yeah,
about
blah blah blah. Did they give her back pay and retirement? And she's like, peace out.
Well, one imagines
she's
her
aged
retirement
twice as much,
is coming up pretty soon. She started in '79. It's 2019. She's been there 40 years.
Yeah, so she's ready to retire.
Anyway, I can tell you, I did reach out to her for an interview for this, and she declined. Which, given everything she's been through and the fact that she's still there, I guess is understandable.
Oh, she's still employed.
She's still there.
Well, she got someone like this. You can kind of tell from they go, I go to meet my maker with a clear conscience. I did my part. And it's kind of surprising there aren't many more like that. I'm glad that there are as many as there are, and important positions that know I'm the only one in this position that can do this, and sooner or later somebody does it. And I'm glad you found so many, but it's.
But I get what you're saying. Rather than the one whistleblower against this entire institutional structure that's trying to crush her down, it should be like one bad, corrupt person in this institutional structure that's
and a
trying
whole
to
bunch of whistleblowers.
That's what we're supposed to think the system is like. Right?
Well, the system's doing their best to stop that. Okay, now I'm showing the. That's what I was looking. I was here looking on your site for your 911 whistleblowers. /CorbettReport.com/911 whistleblowers, and I couldn't see it on the front. You don't have a link to it.
It is on the front. It's on. There's an article thumb underneath the video, which is the 9/11 commissioners currently. But underneath the video, there's an article thumb. It says 9/11 whistleblowers. You click on that.
Oh, thank you. All right, I want everybody to know that. Okay, now we're showing Kate Jenkins here, and then it has the show notes. This is actually your report, and you put stuff in. Is this the formatting that you send to Brock West to start doing the video?
Yeah, essentially.
So you do the research, get them to go get some. All right, cool. Now we know how to do it. We'll
I
just get right on it.
This 9/11 whistleblowers transcript, all 6 videos, is I think 18,000 words. This does not write itself, and it does not happen overnight. I hope people can appreciate it.
Yes, give him money. Okay, now this one is Barry Jennings. Also, I have seen the clips of him, the kind of the short clip and him involved. We run down, but you get the extended extra whatever. I had no idea about a whole bunch of this stuff, that he was actually not only in Building 7, he was in part of the disaster command center of something guy. And then he wound up, he's not around anymore. What happened to him?
Good question. So, for people, the reason that you don't really know the story is because originally, Dylan Avery and Jason Burmis, who were the ones who recorded this interview with him talking about his experience, they were going to put it in their next edition of Loose Change at that time, which was going to be Loose Change Final Cut. So they had released a little teaser sort of that, basically just saying, okay, we've got this interview of this guy who was in WTC7 talking about explosions in the building. They released a little bit of it. But then Barry Jennings started to get kickback from his office because he did work for the city. He was a high up kind of guy, had the key to the city and everything because he was a 9/11 survivor and all that. So he started to get pressure, and basically his job was being threatened. So he came back to Dylan and Jason and said, I don't want you to put that in your documentary. Don't use it. So they never released the full thing. They didn't release the full interview until I think it was 2007 or 2008. BBC comes out with their Conspiracy Files documentary on the Third Tower, where they debunk WTC7. Oh, don't worry, guys. It was office fire. And in that, they interviewed Barry Jennings to basically get him to go on the record to say, oh yeah, I said some things in that interview with Dylan and Jason, but I didn't say I was stepping over dead bodies and things like this. He started to recant. And so at that time, Jason and Dylan said, okay, well, now that you've done that, we're releasing the full interview. And so that's when they released the full interview. So that was a few years after the first teaser clip came. So people might not have seen that when it happened. But essentially, I mean, even in the BBC smear job, they have Barry saying, oh, I didn't say I was stepping over dead bodies. And then they cut to Dylan Avery, who had the actual footage on his phone, playing it for them, saying, and then I was, well, you know when you're stepping over dead bodies, like coming directly out of his mouth. So, I mean, but even that is kind of, yes, it's important, but it's kind of peripheral to Barry Jennings' main story. So your question is, who's Barry? What was he doing in WTC7? He was a higher up. He wouldn't say, at least on the record, which department he worked in, because he had to cover himself that way. But he was high up in New York City something office, and part of emergency planning, emergency disaster planning for that office. And so he was involved with the Office of Emergency Management, which was the emergency command center coordination thing that would spring into action in any big New York event, right? Which, I mean, there's a whole other story to do with that. And
well, the fact that he got in there, he's in there, and somebody calls him, they say, you're in the office? Nobody else, get the hell out now!
Yeah. So that does raise the question: why was the Office of Emergency Management in World Trade Center Building 7, right across from the Twin Towers that had been the target of terrorists, that was a known target? That's a whole other thing that I covered in my 9/11 suspects video on Rudy Giuliani a few years ago, if people are interested in that. But anyway, so he gets called in to go to the Office of Emergency Management. He goes up with someone he didn't know at the time, but it was Michael Hess, which is the City Corporation Counsel, who, by the way, was not only a close confidant of Rudy Giuliani, but went on to become, I believe, the manager of Giuliani Partners, or whatever Giuliani created in the wake of 9/11. So, yeah. So there's a reason why you don't hear about Michael
Barry
Hess's
Jennings
side of this
passed
story.
recently, didn't he? I got the impression. Oh, okay.
So again, just to complete the story for people who don't know, they go up. They're in the office. According to Barry, according to the story he told, they went in after the first plane strike, before the second plane strike. He says that the second plane strike must have occurred when they were inside in the office trying to figure out what's going on. Nobody's here. The whole office is abandoned. Coffee still smoking. Sandwiches half eaten. What's going on? Where is everybody? They're calling around. He calls one of his supervisors and says, "Oh, yeah, I'm in Building 7. I'm in the Office of Emergency Management." He says, get out now." Michael Hess comes running and says, I found because the elevators weren't working by this point. So I found the stairwell. They start going down the stairwell. As they're descending, they get to the 6th floor. Boom, huge explosion, blows them up. Barry's left hanging on a handrail, as he says, and they have to scramble back up to the 8th floor, which is the lowest floor they can get to now. And they're trapped there. He says he looks one way, there's the building, he looks the other way, it's gone. I mean, so some explosive event has taken place, and there's some big, huge gash in the building. The floors below them are completely blown out. He insists that the North and South Tower were still standing at this point. They break out a window. They're talking to some firefighters down there. He's going to slide down a fire hose. They say, "Don't do that. It will not hold you." Let's get you out of there. And then all the firefighters run away. And he had no idea, but he says, "Oh, that was when the first tower collapsed." And then after the dust settles, they come back. They run away again. The second tower collapsed. So according to Barry Jennings, the towers collapsed while he was in there after the explosion that took place. That is an important part of the timeline because, of course, the debunkers say, no, the explosion was just the debris falling from the first tower collapsing. It hit World Trade Center 7. That's what they experienced. Barry Jennings is insistent that the Twin Towers were still standing. I mean, how do we know? Who are we going to sort? But at any rate, that was Barry Jennings' story, and that's why it's important. There were explosions, and he said there were multiple explosions going off. Eventually, they get rescued. They get pulled out through a hole in the wall, and he gets interviewed on live TV, which is how Dylan and Jason found out about it in the first place. So, fast forward, as I say, the BBC comes to interview him, and he recants and says, "Oh, I didn't like the way they portrayed me." So they release the full video to show we're not taking it out of context. This is what he said. And then right on the eve of the release of NIST's WTC-7 report, which they released in September of 2008. They'd been working on it 7 years, trying to come up with some reason why this building collapsed. They have ultimately came up with, it was just ordinary office fires, caused the complete progressive collapse of this 47-story building. Right on the eve of the release of that report, they come out, it emerges, oh yeah, Barry Jennings is dead. He died last month. No details, no nothing. In the wake of that, now here's a whole other part of this that I didn't even get into, but in the wake of that, Dylan Avery hired a private investigator to investigate the death of Barry Jennings because he knew something was clearly up. There's this whole
Dylan
other
Avery,
story.
go ahead and remind us who that is.
He was one of the producers, the creators, director of Loose Change, which was the first viral internet documentary about 9/11.
Loose Change, I remember we got stacks this high when they were giving them out in cylinders, and we got them and we started passing them out to legislators and so on. That's when Senator Karen Johnson, she asked me if she could have a bunch more, and I hooked her up with Jason. She got like 400 of them, and she gave them to everybody at the Capitol, and she did these manila envelopes that she gave to every legislator, and live, she got them and said, "You guys don't know," and she just went off on them. That's why Jesse Ventura came here and Charles Goyette and we had a big event downtown, and that was all because Karen did that, because we made sure she got all the videos she needed. So that Loose Change and Loose Change. What was it? Second edition or something like that.
Yeah. Second
You know, it
edition
was. I mean, there are a lot of people that'll complain about some little something, but I mean, in the
they definitely
entirety,
got some
it was
stuff wrong.
amazing.
They kept revising things. They kept moving forward. But that, I mean, it's crazy to think that there were essentially student filmmakers that were doing this that should have been done by the big investigative. Why weren't they doing it? It's because obviously this was the place that the mainstream media could not go. So Dylan Avery hires this PI to find out what happened to Barry Jennings. You know, how did he die? What happened? The PI apparently comes back, gives him back his fee, says, "I've called the police in on this. Don't talk to me ever again." Goes away. So that was where the story stood. Now, there are people online who have found posts and comments by someone claiming to be Barry Jennings' son, who said that Barry Jennings died of leukemia, which his twin brother had also died of like 20 years before. So, you know, there's no big mystery here or whatever. I don't know. Again, these are social media posts. How are you going to sort that out? Maybe he did die of leukemia peacefully in his sleep in his hospital bed in August of 2008. I don't know. But anyway, right on the eve of the release of the WTC7.
Yeah, but I'm sure all this has to weigh on these people's minds. You know, you're in an America that the truth is treason and an empire of lies kind of thing. Let's go ahead and go to the next one. I don't want to run out of time with you because all these are really good. Let me see. Scroll down. All right. Here we have Michael Springman. Tell us his story.
Michael Springman was a Foreign Service officer who was appointed to the Jeddah consulate as his first assignment back in 1980. I want to say 87. Anyway, late 1980s, he was appointed to the Jeddah consulate. And so he went over there as a consular officer. Part of his duties was to approve or disapprove visa requests of people who were trying to get into the United States. And so, of course, you have the general things that you're looking for: someone with ties to their country that show that they're not going to try to defect to the U.S. or something. They're going to come back because they have family, they have a business, they have a reason for going to the U.S. They have whatever business ties in the U.S. or they have some specific reason for going there. Blah blah blah. The types of things they would check. Except he would keep getting he would deny visas to people who had no conceivable reason for going to the U.S., no ties, just shady people who shouldn't be getting visas. He would deny them, and then his boss, CIA, as he says, everyone in that consulate except for a few of us were CIA or NSA. Surprise, surprise. There's intelligence agents all over.
Now, which consulate is this?
This is the Jeddah consulate in Jeddah of Saudi Arabia.
Okay.
So he was denying these visas, and that kept getting overturned by his superiors on these certain people. And sometimes he would come and say to him, this guy, can you just make sure that he gets the visa? He's good, trust me, kind of thing. He would get that sometimes, and so he's wondering what's going on. He knew there had been some big brouhaha with the person before him that ultimately left Jeddah in a mess because he wasn't playing ball with his higher ups. He could never get a straight answer what was going on, why this was happening. Anyway, after he leaves, he continues trying to find out, what was happening there. He's filing FOIA requests and what have you, talking to superiors, talking to other people.
Now he's doing this post 9/11.
This is pre 9/11. This is after he leaves. 89 or 90, something like that.
Okay, yeah. Help me with the dates. All right, yeah.
And he's trying to figure out what the hell was that all about. He talks to Joseph Treno, the journalist in Washington, and says, "Oh, you were part of an operation. They were running, essentially, Osama bin Laden's terrorist boys into the U.S. for training, and then they'd get shipped back off to Afghanistan for the Soviet-Afghan war. That was what you were in the middle of. It was an intelligence operation, and this makes total sense to Michael." Oh yeah, okay, I get it, because that was our objective at the time. Osama and the Saudis were heavily funding the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, and there were training centers, the Al Khifa Center and others that were being puppeteered or managed or known about anyway by the CIA in various respects. And there are people like the Blind Sheikh and others that are getting their visas to enter rubber stamped, and so there's clearly an intel operation going on. Oh, okay, that makes sense. Fast forward now. So that was late 1980s. Fast forward to 2001, where it emerges that 12 of the 19 hijackers, alleged so-called, got their visa specifically from the Jeddah consulate. Actually, no, sorry, 14 of the 19 got their
Now, none of these
visas.
had anything to do with the 93 World Trade Center thing or something. This is...
That was
Okay.
years.
All right.
That was a different thing. But 14 of the 19 got their visas there. 12 from the same one consular officer approved 12 of the 9/11 hijackers' visas. That's a pretty remarkable thing. And so in the course, so Michael Springman has been talking about this for years, and so he is writing a book, Visas for Al-Qaeda, CIA Handouts That Rock the World.
Oh.
And so he's researching this. He finds out it's Shayna Steinger is the name of this consular officer who issued 12 of the 19. And in fact, she issued 18 visas, but some of them were multiple times to the same person. But anyway, whatever. 12 of the 19 hijackers, so-called alleged. So he actually finds Shayna, tracks her down, confronts her over the phone. What happened? Why were you doing this? What was going on? Who were you being pressured by? She's like, they cleared me. It's okay. I just did what I was told. And that's where she leaves it. And he could never get a straight answer out of her.
She probably didn't have one. She's just a good,
it's
stooge
very
to
possible.
do whatever.
I'm not saying Shayna Steinger is some sort of mastermind of 9/11. I would be surprised if she knew at all what she was involved in. But it just does seem like it's very interesting. It's the exact same consulate doing presumably.
Oh no, I'm sure someone was there making sure it happened. Who actually stamped it and went next? That could be anybody.
Exactly. So anyway, so that's the way that ties in. So Michael Springman isn't technically blowing the whistle about 9/11, but he's talking about a specific aspect of it that was important.
No, I think it's fascinating.
Which is part of the whole cover of the legend of the people who are alleged to be hijackers. That obviously I am doubtful of that story, but it was part of the overall operation.
Where did that story come to your attention from?
I couldn't at this point remember the first time I ever heard it. I have certainly known about it since I started researching 9/11 Truth, but I don't know where I got it. But I did have it, for example, I even had Michael Springman in my Al-Qaeda Doesn't Exist documentary from 2009, I think. I was working on that. It was going to be a multi-part documentary telling the whole big Al-Qaeda story, but I never got it finished. But in that first part that I had completed enough, Michael Springman was in there talking. So I've known about him. I've interviewed him several years ago when he released the Visas for Al-Qaeda book, and I interviewed him for this series as well.
Excellent. Okay, now we got, one of my favorites. This is a good, you're waiting for the movie. This is for the made-for-TV movie right here. William Rodriguez. All right, let's tell the William Rodriguez story.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, this is a hero of 9/11. Clearly, if anyone is a hero, it's someone like William Rodriguez, and he doesn't call himself that. But essentially, his story is he was working. Janitor isn't quite the right word. He was a whatever you call it. I mean, he was a high up.
He was a maintenance supervisor, and when you've got the World Trade Center, you're the man.
Exactly. And literally, he had the only master key in the North Tower that morning, which was important because a lot of the doors, it was a Class A building, so doors were locked and sealed off so that any event that happens, any fire or whatever, is not going to spread down to lower floors. So a lot of the doors were locked. And in fact, I did play, I think that clip, I might have been in the Kate Jenkins video, but the clip, people coming through the dust, and one of the guys turns around and says to the camera, and the fire door on 76 was locked, and walks away. And who knows how many people died because of the way that turned out. Anyway, so Rodriguez was going. He got some people out where he was in the basement. There was an explosion. He got some people out. He went back into the buildings and helped the firefighters up out a back way because the freight elevator was down. And he was literally carrying people out on wheelchairs up until the moment of the collapse, the destruction of the towers. He dives under a fire truck and gets pulled out of the debris afterwards. So he's sometimes called the last man out. I don't think he was technically the last man out, but anyway, he was certainly there till the end.
Well, the main thing is that in your video is that they were aware something happened like 6 seconds before the first plane hit. Tell that story.
This part of the story that makes him the whistleblower, because the media loved this story. Obviously, this is one of the heroes. This is something this is a great story. It would be a movie, I'm sure. Instead of Flight 93, it would have been William Rodriguez. Yeah. Except, as he's getting all these accolades and awards and commendations and being invited to the White House and shaking hands with George Bush and everything, he's also insisting from day one and going on that there was an explosion, boom, coming from below them. They were in the basement, one of the sub-basement levels. There were 6 sub-basement levels that were for maintenance and storage and what have you. They were on the first one. He said below them, in one of the maintenance rooms, there was an explosion, blew them upwards. People are screaming, panicking. It cracked the walls, the false ceilings falling down on them. Everyone's wondering what the hell happened. He said at least 6 seconds. He's going to verbalize that he thought it was, I can't remember what he was saying. He thought it was something. And then they hear the bam, way, way up there, the plane. So he insists to this day there was an explosion. And then there was the impact of the plane, which obviously creates problems for the official story. Now, what does that mean? I mean, speculate away, but obviously we know that in 93, the plan was to have truck bombs in the basement that were going to damage the core structural columns and collapse the building or something. Didn't work because the morons who were doing it didn't pull the truck up to the right place, thankfully. But anyway, that was the plan in 93. So was that the plan in 2001? And was it an Al-Qaeda plan, or was there something else going on? Anyway, there was explosions going on throughout the Twin Towers the entire morning. The entire time up until the destruction itself. And then the destruction itself was an explosive event, which is something that I also portray. I think William Rodriguez is a window into that story of...
Yeah, that's what I was... a lot of you have firemen that are there, supporting. I think it was in the William Rodriguez video. Do we have all these firemen going, yeah, boom, 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 boom. We were walking, it blew up in front of us. We got it started and kind of in the lobby.
Explosion in the lobby.
It just goes on and on and on. I've heard these before, and nobody ever addresses them. Why?
Because
how did they able to get away with it?
Because there were no bombs. I mean, NIST says there were no bombs, so it's okay. They investigated the possibility, but they found no evidence of blast events. I mean, there were secondary things going on because of the fires and the jet fuel from the plane that rushed down the elevator shaft and caused an explosion in the lobby, which is nonsense because it doesn't even connect all the way down. There were separate elevators, but anyway, whatever. I mean, that was
whatever.
Yeah.
But
so
see,
anyway,
one thing I want to emphasize on this, in the beginning, we were, when we do all our studies and we're covering it, or you see videos and so on, and a lot of James stuff, I'm sure. And we've been interviewing Richard Gage from the beginning of that, and we've been covering it. I'm telling you, the one thing that nobody ever addresses, and a lot of people talk about, is the blowing off of the marble in the lobby on the bottom from the bombs or detonations or something that was going on the lower floors. The lobby was like before it came down. Before any of that stuff happened, and nobody ever addresses this. I'm in the 9/11 Commission report. They talk about it.
Jet fuel rushed down the elevator shafts and it essentially exploded out in the lobby. And that is the official account of why the lobby was in pieces.
Yeah, 80,
which is just nonsense.
It evaporated before it even got down there.
Yeah. Well, and again, Rodriguez and others have testified there was an explosion before the plane hit, which obviously puts a little link in the 9/11 story. So people probably may have heard William Rodriguez, but probably don't know how much he's been involved in 9/11 truth and activism over the years. In 2004, he actually sued the Bush administration, listing Bush and Cheney and a bunch of others in a suit. He filed an affidavit in that suit anyway. Sadly, obviously, didn't win. And he's been a 9/11 victims advocate, and he was one of the people that was instrumental in getting the 9/11 Commission formed in the first place. And then, of course, they did interview him for the commission behind closed doors, off the record.
Yeah, he talked about. Yeah, so what's it? It's secret. You're not allowed to talk about what you talked about. That you probably told everybody else, and the other guys, the congressmen, sure as heck aren't going to talk about it. So. In your
people might not know there were open hearings to the 9/11 Commission, but a lot of their interviews were just done informally, and a lot of them have the notes that they took of the meeting, but that's essentially it. And Barry Jennings mentioned that in the full 20-plus minute video that he did with Dylan and Jason as well. Yeah, the 9/11 Commission called me in, they got my story, but I never heard from them again. And then Dylan and Jason are saying, well, that 9/11 Commission report literally does not mention WT7. There's one little footnote where they mention the existence of that building. He's like, I don't know. I told them what I knew. I thought they were going to do something with it.
Okay, the commissioners. All right. Now, these guys tell the story, it starts off with Bush and Kissinger and them and how fast that went and all the goodies.
Right. So, this is one part of the 9/11 Commission story that needs to be told every single time. It was 440 whatever days between 9/11 and the actual beginning of the commission, which is insanity. It was however many days or weeks until they started the Pearl Harbor Commission, for example, right?
Now, I got one question before you go on this. The commission on 9/11, the days, was it after they had cleared the site? You know what I mean?
The commission. When the commission started its work.
Yeah, I'm just wondering. You start the investigation after all the evidence is gone.
Right. Well, the 9/11 Commission wasn't in charge of the building performance analysis. Originally, that was FEMA, and then NIST took over. So they were on site. They did have FEMA researchers on site.
Yeah, no, that's not my point. It's like you have the detective, and now you can go to the crime scene.
But essentially, the 9/11 Commission was looking at NIST and FEMA and going, okay.
All right.
But they were trying to find the
window dressing.
Who was this? Who did this? How did it work? Blah, blah, blah. So, but I've talked about this many times. For example, I did 9/11 suspects on Philip Zelikow. Definitely, people should look into that because originally Bush goes and says, "Okay, fine, all right." After literally going to Tom Daschle and saying, "Please limit your investigation into 9/11." Eventually, the pressure's too much. He goes, "Okay, we'll start a commission," and I appoint Henry Kissinger to head up this commission. And that's just such a bizarre, it's so in your face. Even the New York Times,
New
York Times said this is a cover-up. So
in your face.
The story is the 9/11 widows who were instrumental in getting the commission going were in a meeting with Kissinger and asked him to, do you have any clients with the name of bin Laden that you want to disclose before you start this investigation? Which he nearly fell off his couch and the next day resigned. And so they appoint Thomas Kean and Lee Hamilton to head up the commission. Although the executive director was Philip Zelikow, who actually, according to what insiders say, he literally wrote the report, including headlines, chapter headings, subheadings, and sub-subheadings. He had the entire report done before this commission even started its work. I wonder how that works. Anyway, so you get Hamilton and Kean and the other commissioners. The crazy thing, and this is the thing that I would shove in the face of people who don't know anything about 9/11 truth or still believe in the 9/11 Commission report, 6 of the 10 commissioners have on the record publicly expressed their own doubts about their own commission and its findings. That should be a pretty big wake-up call. Hello, even the commissioners do not buy that this is the final word on 9/11, so neither should you, right? But oddly, they don't tend to stress that when they talk about the 9/11 Commission.
How long do you think we got to wait for the real dramatization of what happened?
Dramatization. Well, I mean, there have been.
It's like JFK.
Right.
Oliver Stone, JFK. We get a little bit of something. I mean, whether that was true or not, but I mean, you get some good. Exactly. You get some good drama, and you get some of the you get, not hidden all these facts. You at least ask them. You put them
Tell
out.
You what, I'll give you this. Whatever JFK the movie was, it did spark genuine interest in the assassination in the American public. Did start the JFK. Records Act, which started the whole Assassination Records Review Board, which opened up the whole can of worms and lots of documents, which were ultimately published and released to the public in 98 or 99. And one of those documents was Operation Northwoods. We know about Operation Northwoods essentially because of the JFK movie. I mean,
are there a bunch of documents that are openly sealed? I mean, we got them, but you can't have them. I mean, on 9/11, is there... a big giant probe?
We don't have all the 9/11 Commission records.
No, I know, but are they admitted that they have them and they're not given?
Yeah. I'd have to look it up. I remember because I did a report right after my 9/11 conspiracy theory video back in 2011, the one that's gotten 3 million views. I did a report on the 9/11 Commission records. Essentially, I mean, it was a government record commission that was supposed to record and archive everything, and so they have, I can't remember how many documents, but they've only processed and indexed a tiny fraction of them because they don't have any staff anymore, so they can't. And so the one of the people who worked on that staff were saying, I wish someone would come and request some documents so that we could get more of these out to the public, kind of thing.
Yeah, they'd have to have a budget. Somebody'd have to. Okay.
Yep.
They need a
Exactly.
big giant
so
request.
No, there are tons of records there, but we don't have access to all.
Who
of them.
gets access to? I mean, could you, as a Canadian in Japan, have any standing to request a fully informed whatever?
I could try.
I mean, you give me the forms, I'll do it. I mean, I don't care.
Exactly, yeah.
You know?
There are great sites like muckrock.com. I'm sure you've come across that, where it's basically researchers who do FOIA requests and they put them up on the site. This is the document we're seeking. This is the request, this is the response we got. And if they get documents, they post them up there. So there are diligent researchers out there that do that.
I wouldn't even know what to ask. I went through FOIA stuff, in the early mid-'90s here in Arizona, and I got called in by Attorney General once, or I had a letter from them after I met with one of the directors. It was a Department of Commerce thing. And they were visibly shaken when I was talking to them what I wanted. We're just trying to do our... It was a woman, and she started crying. And I'm going... Wow. Well, I'll let you get back to me, I get an assistant attorney general called me and he said, no, you're not getting them. I go, well, the law says to go sue.
Yeah.
Oh, it's like that. So I've gone down a lot of these avenues, and I know better that's not where you're going to find the truth. And you get a lot of it out. It may send you somewhere like Project Northwood and so on, but...
there are things that come out. It's not a waste of time, but you're not going to get to the bottom of 9/11.
It's not satisfying, but it's very useful.
Yeah.
And to a lot of people.
Decades later, you might get something like Able Archer, that 1983 exercise that NATO was doing, that was simulating a nuclear strike on the USSR, and the Russians got wind of it, and they're like, well, no, I don't think this is a drill. I think they're really going to do it. And it was going up to DEFCON whatever, close enough that we almost got actual real hot nuclear war. And a document, and we've known bits and pieces of that story, but the full documents on Able Archer were only released in the last year or two. So.
I am very happy to have done this with you on 9/11. Thank you for all the research that you've done. And packaging it in this way. Many of us that in the Liberty community that just wanted to know the truth, we watch a lot of videos and so on, it's been accumulating. A lot of after, I don't know how many videos you got to watch before you go. I saw my first ones were Loose Change and In Plain Sight. Dave Von Kleist, we had interviewed him on this, so on. And his was to debunk some France, criticizing, that's not really what happened 9/11, so he had to go debunk them. Then he found out, damn, they're right. There's a whole bunch of stuff. And then we've had Karen Katowski on. She was in the Pentagon when it hit, and she, of course, we talk about a lot of other things. She didn't like to dwell on it. But one thing she said one time, and she doesn't like talking about it, and I'm going to out her here. She was saying a lot of these combat experienced veterans that are there at the Pentagon, when they were standing out there, they're going, smells like cordite. They knew the smell. So that would be something to check on.
Absolutely.
There's guys there, they go, I know that smell.
What hit the Pentagon? Or was it a bomb? Or blah, blah, blah.
It smelled like cordite. Like I would know what the cordite smelled like. But the, which is an explosive, I think, or something. So this is the kind of stuff that benefits my grandchildren for the future without these kind of 9/11 whistleblower and focusing on whistleblowers. And you didn't even talk about all the other stuff. We haven't got into. These are just the whistleblowers that were bringing up these things. So 911 whistleblowers. You go to thecorbettreport.com/911 whistleblowers, and here it comes. And it just flooded there. Now you go on Freedom's Phoenix. Here we're looking at right there in the remembrance of September 11th. Hundreds of stories that we've covered over the years on this, and it's just. I don't know what's going to happen the next anniversary. What about when it hits 20? Is there going to be a movie? We've had some movies, and they're just more propaganda BS. I can't. They don't get good ratings or anything.
Including Oliver Stone's, right? I never saw it, but
yeah, that was Nicolas Cage or something. Was that the one?
Yeah.
It was about a policeman, stuck in some rubble or something. I didn't even. I watched the. Yeah, never mind. I'm tired of the uncovering the secrets and exposing the lies. Well, I tell you what, we're uncovering secrets, and we're exposing lies every time we have James Corbett on. TheCorbettReport.com. Anything else you want to give out before I let you go, James?
CorbettReport.com. That's it. Got to get going.
Cool. Thanks, man. Peace.
All right. Take care.